Give your 2024 and newer Mustang GT Fastback a boost in both looks and handling with the Eibach Sportline Lowering Springs. Specifically tuned for the S650 GT Fastbacks, these are a big step up in both appearance and performance. They're going to lower the ride height of your car pretty significantly and will make it that much more capable in the twisties without making your car difficult to live with day to day. Eibach is one of the biggest names in the performance suspension game, and with good reason. Their springs are some of the best ones out there, and they put a lot of time and effort into engineering these in such a way that they're going to be a performance enhancement as well as one that enhances the appearance of each specific applications. Now this kit in particular is the Sportline, which is the stiffest of the lowering springs that Eibach offers. So if handling is your priority, these are definitely going to be the right choice for you. They're designed to reduce nosedive during braking, squat during acceleration, and body roll during cornering. So if you're planning to hit the track, you definitely want to get a set of these. They are designed to work with your stock dampers, and they will combine with them for a firmer ride than stock. However, these are not just stiff for the sake of being stiff. As you might have noticed, these are actually progressive springs. Now, if you're not familiar with the term, that means that there are effectively two different rates baked in here. Down at the bottom, you'll notice that the coils are more widely spaced, which indicates a lower spring rate. That's going to allow your car to handle bumps and impacts much like it did stock. Again, it will inherently be a bit more firm than it was from the factory, but it's not going to be punishing. Now at the top, the coils, as you can see, wind closer together for a higher spring rate. So as you lean the car into corners or really hammer on the brakes, the springs will effectively stiffen up, resulting in less body roll and movement and more control for you. This is also going to help your tires stay in better contact with the pavement, resulting in more grip and better handling overall, especially if you're working your car hard. Now, of course, these are also going to make your Mustang look cooler too. Because they are lowering springs, they are physically shorter than your factory originals, so they will lower the car just under 2 inches both front and rear. So you'll have less wheel gap and your car is going to look quite a bit more aggressive. Lowering a car can also aid handling because it is physically moving it closer to the pavement, thus lowering its center of gravity, and that too is a boon for handling because you don't have more weight higher up. The lower it is, the easier it is to maneuver around and the better your car is going to handle. As we've come to expect from Eibach, these are really high quality. Starting with high tensile strength steel, the springs are cold wound into their final shape, so the metal has not been heated and subsequently weakened. The springs are then shot peened to remove any defects, and the material is topped off with Eibach's signature bright red powder coat for some good looks and additional corrosion protection. Now the kit also includes new elastomer bump stops, which are specifically tuned to work with your car's new lowered ride height and help keep things in control. And these are going to be just compliant enough so that if you do happen to hit the bump stops, it's not going to crash and bang all over the place and make it really intolerable. Pricing for this kit comes in at about $400, putting these right in line with some other options in the category. The difference with the Eibachs though are that progressive spring rate and all the research and development they put into making these the ultimate performance lowering springs for the S650. So for what you're getting here, these are a really good deal. They're going to give you the stance you're after and a pretty big performance improvement. You're not going to have to spend a lot of coin to get them. Installation gets a 2 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and the job should take you around 4 hours to complete. While the rears are just going to pop right in place of your stockers, the fronts will require you to use a spring compressor, and you're going to need to disassemble your front struts in order to get them fitted. So make sure you've got that tool on hand and you're familiar with it before you start this job. We're also going to walk you through the process step by step right now, so for that, let's head on out to the shop.
Tools required for this install include a couple different size impact guns, hammer, pass-through ratchet, standard ratchet, clip remover tool, 17mm wrench, vice grips, an extension, caliper hook, 10, 13, 15, 18, 21, and 24mm sockets, 15mm swivel socket, a very deep 10mm socket, 13/16 socket, a pry bar, and a spring compressor. Today we're installing lowering springs on our Mustang. First we're going to watch a quick uninstall video showing you how to remove your factory suspension components, and I'll meet you back here for the install.
All right, so first thing we need to do is get our caliper off of our knuckle. So we have a bolt here and a bolt here. So we're going to grab our impact and 15mm socket, take those two out. Pop those bolts out. We're gonna grab our caliper hanging tool and just hang that up and set that aside. All right, we're just gonna take our rotor off now since it's basically just falling off. Hold on by the studs and set that aside. All right, so we're gonna grab our impacted 18mm socket and take our nut off our sway bar link here. Now we have a 17mm wrench that we're gonna hold the backside with just because it will spin. Once we get that nut off, we can just pull that back through our strut, nut that lean off to the side. So we have our ABS wire attached to our strut here. So we're gonna grab our clip removal tool and pop it off here and here. Pull that aside. Now we can take our 2 main bolts out of our knuckle. All right, now we're gonna switch to our impact and 24mm socket. We're gonna take our 2 nuts off of our main bolts here on the knuckle. Now we're gonna leave those threaded on, just thread them off a little bit, just so we're not gonna mushroom the end of the bolt here. Grab your hammer and just tap those bolts through. They are splined in, so they don't just spin out. Once you have them both through, take our nuts off. You can lift up on the knuckle slightly. That might help you get it out a little bit easier. Or just take your hammer, just tap them gently through. All right, just gonna push up on our knuckle here a little bit. That'll loosen them up. All right, and then we'll just pull the bottom one out. Just let that knuckle rest down. And we just have our 3 bolts up top that we can remove our strut. All right, so we have our 3 bolts up top here. They are all 15mm. So we're gonna take our back 2 completely off first. All right, then as we take our 3rd one off, our strut will fall when you take it off completely. So you're gonna wanna hold the strut from underneath and take that off at the same time. All right, this pulls out from the bottom. Once you have this side out, you can go do the same thing for the other side.
So now that we have our factory strut removed, we're gonna come over to the spring compressor so that we can remove our strut. I've got the bottoms hooked onto the spring and the top on the top hat. You wanna make sure this is nice and straight, and also that you're gripping onto the spring and the top hat pretty well. And then you can start cranking down on it to release that spring tension. So now we're just gonna crank down on this until our strut is nice and loose. Now I should also mention I have a pair of vice grips here on the spring right in front of this piece so that this doesn't rotate. Now our strut's starting to get loose, so we're just gonna keep going a little more. And now you can see that's moving. So now I'm gonna take a pass-through socket and ratchet. I've got a 13/16 socket that I'm gonna get on that nut. And then I've got a long, thin 10mm socket that I'm gonna use to hold this stud to prevent it from spinning. I've got my ratchet right up against the metal so that it holds. And then I'm just gonna start loosening that nut. Be careful, make sure that your top hat isn't rotating while you do this. Once we start getting closer to the end, I'm gonna put a foot underneath the strut just to prevent it from falling. And then we can slide that out of there. Now we're just gonna pop off our dust boot, slide our bump stop off, and then we're gonna pop out this rubber piece, and we're gonna transfer these all over to our new strut. So now that we have our strut removed, I'm just gonna release tension on our spring so that we can get our top hat to transfer over to our new one. Now I can pull those jaws out. Now this whole thing is one assembly. There's a bunch of ball bearings in here, so you wanna make sure that you keep this together. And I'm gonna pop my spring out. I'm gonna take my new spring. The logo needs to be facing upright. This black collar is at the top. I'm just gonna get that in there. I'm gonna make my adjustments so that it sits straight. I'll get my top hat. You can see the impression of where the spring ends. So we're just gonna match that up. Lay it on, and then I'm gonna lower this down so that we can get our jaws on our top hat. I'm gonna get my vice grips again, put it on the spring right next to our jaw so that we make sure this doesn't just spiral and spin out. Now we just need to get our strut ready to go into our spring and top hat. So I'm just gonna pull that dust boot off, remove my bump stop, and then we're gonna slide our new one on in its place. This flat side's going towards the top. And then I'll throw my dust boot back on, and we can get this in from the bottom up to the top, and I'll thread my nut on. Now we've got this little notch here that the end of the spring is gonna sit against, so make sure you line that up as you're going in. And I'll grab my factory nut, start threading that on top. Now I'm gonna take my 13/16 pass-through socket and get it on the nut, and my long, skinny 10mm socket to get on the stud, and I'm gonna tighten that down. As you're tightening this down, make sure you keep an eye on the end of your spring and that isolator and make sure that it's still lined up. So now I'm just gonna do one last check, make sure that that isolator is right up against the end of the spring there, and I'm good to go. So I'm gonna start relieving tension. Now, if you have too much tension on here and you can't rotate it to where you can get it to meet up to the edge of that, you can start cranking down on it a little bit more to compress that spring, and then you'll be able to turn your shock. So now I'm just gonna relieve that tension. Then I'll pull my jaws out, remove my vice grips, and remove my strut. So now we're gonna take my strut and get it up into the top of the strut tower, and then I'm gonna thread my nuts on top, just hand tight for now. We'll come back and tighten those later. So now I'm going to reconnect the knuckle to the strut. I like to get that bottom bolt in first, kind of use it as a pivot point. Now with that in, I just need to push up on the knuckle to get that top hole to line up. And then I'm just going to take a hammer, tap those through. And I'll thread those nuts on the other side. And I'll take a 24mm socket and tighten those down. Next, we can reinstall our sway bar link. Now we've got this hex cut out here that we can get a 17mm wrench on to hold and prevent it from spinning. So I'll get my 17mm wrench on that and my 18mm socket to tighten down the nut. Now I'm going to reinstall my rotor. And then I'm going to take a lug nut to thread onto that bottom stud to hold it flat against the hub. It's going to make it easier to get our caliper back on. Now I'll pop the caliper off the hook, slide that over the rotor. And I'll thread my 2 bolts in. And then I'll take my 15mm swivel socket to tighten those down. Now we can reconnect those two clips into our strut for the ABS line. Now last thing we need to do is come back up top, take our 15mm socket, tighten down your 3 nuts, and then you can repeat the whole process on the other side.
All right, so we're going to disconnect some things at first in the rear here to get our shock and spring out. So first we're just going to pop our ABS wire up off of this tab, and then our harness here. There's a clip. We're just going to use our clip removal tool and pop that out. And then lastly, we're going to take this 10mm bolt out here, grab our impact 10mm socket, and zip that out. That's just going to give us enough slack and everything so we can drop this side of the subframe down. So we're going to start by getting our shock out of the way. So we do have a pole jack just supporting the knuckle so it doesn't drop down. Grab our impact and 18mm socket, take these 2 top bolts out. All right, so I moved our pole jack out of the way. I have it on our subframe, ready to drop that afterwards. But we're going to take these 2 bottom 15mm bolts out. So impact 15mm socket. All right, so now we can take our shock out of the way. All right, so like I said, I have our pole jack supporting our subframe. We're gonna take these 2 bolts out first. We're gonna grab our impact and 13mm socket. Then we're gonna switch to a 21mm socket and take the main subframe bolt out. All right, now we're going to come back to the rear of the spring and you'll see your other subframe mount bolt. Same thing, impact, and we have a 21mm swivel socket just to get in there a little bit easier. All right, now we're going to lower our pole jack so we can get our spring out. You can just slowly lower it, and then you can just take it off the pole jack completely just to get you a little bit of wiggle room. Pull down on the subframe. And you can get your spring and top mount out of the way.
So now that we've got our factory springs out, we're going to remove our rubber isolator from the top. And now we're just going to put that onto our new spring. We've got this spot that's going to sit right against the end of the spring. So you can just kind of twist it on, and then we'll get this into place. So now I'm going to take the spring and slide it in over our sway bar. Pop that into place, and then I'm going to pull down to get that lined up. And then I'm going to get my pole jack back into place so we can raise our subframe back up. So now before we start raising this back up, I've got a good amount of room, so I'm just going to get my shock in there. So I'm just going to drop that down into place, and I'm just going to hand thread in my top 2 bolts. And we'll come back and fully tighten those down later. And I'm just going to start raising up on that pole jack, raise everything up, and get my mounts close enough to get my bolts in. So now I'm just raising my pole jack up to raise that subframe. And then once I've got that pretty much there, I'm going to take my bolt and start my threads. And I'm just going to raise it the rest of the way up, and we'll hop over to the other side and start threading those bolts in. Now over on the other side, we'll reinstall that bracket. I'm going to get my main subframe mounting bolt started first. I'm going to get it most of the way threaded in by hand, and then I'll start threading my smaller bolts. You want to make sure you get these 2 bolts in before you tighten down your big one, because these can strip out pretty easily. And then I'm going to grab my 21mm socket, tighten down my main bolt, and I'll tighten these. Then switch to a 13mm socket, tighten down these bolts, and then we'll hop over to the other side. And then take that same 21mm socket and tighten down this side. Now we're gonna hop underneath and reinstall our 2 lower shock bolts. So I've got one hand on there just to help me line it up. Now with our bolts threaded in, I'm gonna take a 15mm socket and tighten those down. Now I'm just gonna work my way up from the bottom. I'm gonna reinstall the brake line bracket and then tighten that down with a 10mm socket. Then we can reconnect that grommet for our ABS line. And then I'm gonna take an 18mm socket to tighten down my 2 upper shock bolts. Now once you have your spring installed on one side, you can do the exact same thing on the other side. So that'll wrap up this review and install of the Eibach Sportline Lowering Springs for your 2024 and newer Mustang GT Fastback. Thank you for watching, and for all things Mustang, keep it right here at AmericanMuscle.com.